the early hours of July 13th, 1943. Somewhere in the central Solomon Islands, a column of US Navy cruisers and destroyers cuts through the dark waters of Kula Gulf. Aboard the lead ship Honolulu, radar operators peer into glowing green screens, tracking ghostly echoes moving south, fast, tight, and closing. Behind those signals lies a familiar threat, another Tokyo Express run, bringing Japanese reinforcements to the island of Kolombangara. Rear Admiral Ainsworth's formation is ready, guns are manned, turrets trained, and torpedo tubes armed. The cruisers have already seen action in these waters just days earlier, but so have the Japanese. This time, they've come prepared, with fast destroyers, experienced crews, and the lethal Type 93 long-lance torpedoes. Somewhere in that approaching line is the cruiser Jintsu, leading a fresh wave of infantry for the garrison at Vila. The radar operator steadies his voice. Multiple contacts, range 22,000 yards, bearing 325. Silence for a beat, then, open fire! The Battle of Kolombangara has begun. The waters of Kula Gulf had barely settled when both sides began preparing for the next round. The July 6th engagement had revealed much. The Americans had proven capable of striking first with radar-guided fire, but the Japanese had shown that even under pressure, the Tokyo Express could still deliver its cargo. Over 2,600 troops had landed safely at Vila. Though 2 Japanese destroyers were lost, the result was far from decisive, and Helena, one of the US Navy's most seasoned light cruisers, had been lost to long-lance torpedoes. Rear Admiral Ainsworth's force had returned to Tulagi with little fanfare. The surviving cruisers, St. Louis and Honolulu, bore only minor damage, but morale was tempered by the realization that radar fire control, while tactically superior, could not alone prevent damage or loss. The US Navy's night fighting doctrine was improving rapidly, but the Japanese remained lethal, especially in confined waters. For Ainsworth and his staff, the message was clear. The reinforcement line to Kolombangara had to be severed decisively, or the costly campaign for New Georgia would continue to bleed resources and time. On land, the American advance toward Munda Point was slow and grinding. Terrain, resistance, and weather combined to stall progress. Jungle fighting neutralized many advantages in firepower, while Japanese units, well entrenched and supplied, continued to contest every inch. What made Munda's resistance so durable was not just the determination of its defenders, but the steady flow of reinforcements and material arriving via Vila and Kolombangara. From a strategic standpoint, Kolombangara had become the keystone in Japan's defense of the Central Solomons. It served not only as a staging ground for reinforcements to New Georgia, but also as a fallback position. The port at Vila was a critical transshipment node, and the island's position allowed Japanese destroyers to operate laterally across the archipelago. As long as Kolombangara held, Munda remained viable. In Tokyo, the High Command understood the narrowing window of opportunity. American landings at Rendova and the pressure on Munda indicated that a major offensive was underway. Reinforcing Kolombangara became a priority. Rear Admiral Shunji Izaki, commanding the reinforcement run scheduled for July 13th, was tasked with transporting 1,200 more troops from the 13th Infantry Regiment, along with a significant volume of ammunition and supplies. Zaki's force numbered 1 light cruiser and 9 destroyers. His flagship Jintsu led a screening group of Mikazuki, Yukikaze, Hamakaze, Kiyonami, and Yugura, tasked with engaging or delaying any American force that appeared. Behind them came the transport division, Satsuki, Minazuki, Unagi, and Matsukaze, each carrying troops and supplies for Kolombangara. Once the screen made contact with the enemy, these 4 destroyers were to slip into Vela Gulf, unload at Ariel on the island's southwest coast, and withdraw before daylight. On the American side, plans were quickly forming for another night operation. Intelligence, aided by ultra-intercepts and aerial reconnaissance, indicated a strong likelihood of another reinforcement convoy moving down the slot. Rear Admiral Ainsworth was ordered to interdict. Task Group 36.1 was reinforced and restructured. The cruisers Honolulu and St. Louis remained the core, joined now by the New Zealand light cruiser HMNZS Leander. a veteran of Mediterranean and Indian Ocean operations. Though smaller than her American counterparts, Leander added a third radar-equipped cruiser to the line. 5 destroyers, Nicholas, Radford, O'Bannon, Jenkins, and Chevalier, completed the force. The US ships sailed from Tulagi on July 12th, heading northwest at high speed. Ainsworth's approach followed standard doctrine. Use radar to detect and engage enemy ships before they could launch torpedoes. Maintain a tight formation to coordinate fire, and, if possible, strike before the enemy realized they had been detected. But there were complications. Leander's fire control system, while effective, did not fully integrate with the American system. Her radar operated on different frequencies, and communication procedures between the US and Commonwealth vessels had not yet been harmonized. Moreover, the Japanese had learned from Kula Gulf. Their formation was more tightly controlled, and torpedo doctrine more aggressively enforced. By the night of July 12th, both forces were converging. The American task group entered Kula Gulf under darkness, then turned southwest towards Kolombangara, paralleling the slot. Ainsworth intended to intercept the enemy before the transports reached Ariel, and if possible, destroy them outright. Izaki's column was meanwhile approaching from the west. Jintsu led the way, with destroyers flanking and trailing in column. The troop-carrying destroyers would peel off toward Vila once enemy contact was confirmed or evaded. Izaki's formation was spaced to allow for rapid torpedo deployment. Most of his ships carried the deadly Type 93 torpedoes, which could be launched in wide fan patterns at ranges beyond 20,000 yards, approximately 18.3 kilometers. Shortly before midnight on July 12th, Ainsworth's lead destroyers began to register faint returns on radar. The Battle of Kolombangara was about to begin. At 0:15, a PBY Black Cat spotted the Japanese covering force. By 0:59, radar operators aboard Honolulu, the lead American cruiser, picked up faint contacts. Rear Admiral Walden Ainsworth estimated them to be about 26 miles out, roughly 46,000 yards. He commanded from Honolulu, confirmed the signals, and ordered general quarters. The battle group, 3 cruisers and 9 destroyers, was arrayed in line ahead. Honolulu, Leander, and St. Louis formed the center. Destroyers Nicholas, O'Bannon, Taylor, Jenkins, and Radford led the van. Ralph Talbot, Buchanan, Maury, Woodworth, and Gwynn followed in the rear, though Buchanan, slowed by engine trouble, struggled to reach her assigned station. The radar echoes grew stronger, more distinct, more tightly grouped. These were Japanese surface ships, moving south at high speed in an organized column. At the head of the enemy line was the light cruiser Jintsu, Rear Admiral Shunji Izaki's flagship. 4 destroyers, Satsuki, Minazuki, Unagi, and Matsukaze, were loaded with Major Yamada's battalion of the 45th Infantry Regiment, plus a mountain artillery battery bound for Ariel on Kolombangara's southwest. The US presence at Rendova and inland pressure against Munda meant that reinforcement could not wait. The Japanese were executing a familiar pattern. Their plan called for the troop-carrying destroyers to break formation once close to Kolombangara and dash via Vela Gulf and unload at Ariel on Kolombangara's southwest coast. Meanwhile, the screening group, led by Jintsu, would engage and, if possible, delay or cripple any American surface force attempting to intercept. The maneuver was well rehearsed, but against radar-equipped ships with a growing edge in coordination and fire control, it was also increasingly dangerous. Ainsworth, relying on radar bearings and past experience in Kula Gulf, judged their intent correctly. At 1:12, he gave the order to open fire. Honolulu's forward turrets boomed first. Muzzle flashes lit the sea as her 6-inch shells began their arc toward the leading Japanese contact, Jintsu. Within moments, St. Louis and Leander joined in, each selecting targets by radar bearing and opening up in disciplined salvos. The American gunners were fast and experienced, drilling their fire through pre-calculated solutions. In the darkness, it was a one-sided start. Jintsu, caught in the open with no radar and only rudimentary optics, was hit within 2 minutes of the opening salvo. She had begun emitting a searchlight challenge, standard procedure for Japanese night encounters. But that only gave away her position further. The American radar solution was solid, and salvos from Honolulu, St. Louis, and Leander landed with devastating accuracy. Shells tore through the bridge and forward compartments, instantly severing communications. One of the first hits likely killed much of Admiral Izaki's staff outright. Fires erupted in the hangar deck and forward mess. Her port side was riddled with splinters, and her main battery never managed to bring effective fire to bear. A 6-inch shell from Leander struck near the base of her forward mast, which collapsed across the charred forecastle. Another round exploded near the starboard torpedo tubes. Soon, Jintsu was an uncontrolled blaze, her bow dipping. Her engines slowed, then stopped. She drifted, burning fiercely and still absorbing hits, as the American gunners walked their fire down her length. As the Japanese column began to scatter, one destroyer was seen maneuvering to the west, possibly attempting a torpedo run or evasion. A few moments later, American observers reported a large explosion in that sector and the sudden disappearance of a radar contact. It was initially assumed that a destroyer had been hit and sunk, but post-war records do not confirm any loss beyond Jintsu during the engagement. The identity of the destroyed vessel, if one was indeed lost, remains uncertain. Japanese destroyers had already loosed their spreads. The long lances, with ranges far beyond anything the Allies could match, fanned out silently across the Gulf, blanketing the path of Ainsworth's advancing column. Jintsu was still afloat, though only barely. Her speed had dropped to near zero. Flames raged from stem to stern, painting her silhouette against the dark sea. The cruiser was visibly listing, smoke streaming from her midships, the mainmast gone, and her guns silent. Fire had reached the aft magazine by now, and intermittent secondary explosions could be seen amid the glow. With her command crew dead or wounded, there was no coordinated damage control. Shells from Leander and St. Louis continued to land amidships, although many gunners had already begun shifting to secondary targets. Ainsworth's formation was intact, but heading directly into a spread of long lances. Dozens of torpedoes launched from several bearings at ranges of 9,000 to 12,000 yards. The Americans had no practical defense, sonar was ineffective at those speeds, and radar could not detect submerged weapons. At 1:24, disaster first struck Leander. A torpedo slammed into her port bow, flooding a boiler room, crippling her forward turrets, and reducing her speed to 10 knots. Steering grew unreliable, and the cruiser had no choice but to break off. Bradford was detached to screen her withdrawal, laying smoke as the damaged cruiser limped away. 18 men were killed and 10 were missing. Leander would require lengthy repairs. At 1:45, one or more torpedoes from McInerney's destroyers struck Jintsu. She broke apart, either from hull failure or magazine detonation. Her forward section plunged beneath the surface, followed shortly by the stern. Rear Admiral Izaki and nearly all of his 482-man crew went down with her. Only a handful of survivors would later be recovered by Japanese destroyers withdrawing under cover of smoke. Aboard the US cruisers, the destruction of Jintsu was only a brief reprieve. Radar still showed multiple contacts maneuvering, and lookouts began reporting flashes and faint wakes, signs that Japanese destroyers were executing evasive turns and launching torpedoes. Some of the tracks were invisible, but others left phosphorescent trails or were glimpsed in moonlight. The main column pressed on, but just after 2 o'clock the torpedo storm found its mark. At 2:08, St. Louis was hit forward. The blast tore open her bow, flooding compartments and throwing men from their stations. Steam lines burst in engineering spaces, filling compartments with scalding vapor, and fires flared near her second stack, likely fed by ruptured fuel lines. 2 boiler rooms were knocked out, cutting her power by half. Damage control teams contained the flooding and fires, and she stayed in formation with her guns still in action. At 2:11, Honolulu was next. A torpedo exploded against her starboard bow just ahead of turret number 1, while another lodged unexploded in her stern. The deck heaved under the blast, electrical circuits shorted, and her forward section began to flood. Crewmen were thrown from their posts, but emergency teams quickly sealed compartments and shored up bulkheads. The cruiser slowed and veered off course, but kept propulsion and continued firing. Then, at 2:14, came the fatal blow to Gwyn, the destroyer bringing up the rear. A long lance slammed amidships, detonating in her engine room. The explosion cracked her keel and tore a wide gap in her hull. Secondary blasts rattled through her after compartments as depth charges and ammunition ignited. Flames swept across her decks, forcing gunners and signalmen to abandon their posts. With power gone and the stern sinking, her captain, Lieutenant Commander J.B. Fellows, gave the order to abandon ship. Rafts were thrown overboard, and men unable to wait leapt straight into the sea as the aftermagazine threatened to explode. Despite the confusion, the evacuation was orderly. Destroyers closed in to rescue survivors, dropping nets and boats into the water as the destroyer burned. Later that morning, after her crew was safe, Ralph Talbot scuttled the wreck. Gwyn went down stern first with 57 dead or missing, and 2 more men later succumbed to their wounds. Meanwhile, coordination with Leander had always been difficult. Her British radar and fire control systems did not align with US practice, and once damaged, she was effectively out of the fight. With 3 cruisers torpedoed and 1 destroyer lost, Ainsworth regrouped what remained of his column. Facing 3 damaged cruisers and the confirmed loss of Gwyn, he ordered withdrawal. His remaining destroyers closed in protectively as the battered force turned south. The Japanese transport group, meanwhile, had reached Ariel on Kolombangara around 2 o'clock. By 4 o'clock, they had unloaded Major Yamada's battalion and ammunition and then cleared through Vela Gulf unopposed. The Allies paid a heavy price. Gwyn went down with 57 men dead or missing, with 2 more succumbing later. Leander lost 18 killed and 10 missing after her torpedo hit. Honolulu and St. Louis both suffered crippling bow damage, but against all odds, neither cruiser counted serious casualties. Japanese losses were fewer in ships, but greater in lives. The light cruiser Jintsu sunk with nearly all hands, including Rear Admiral Shunji Izaki. Though many destroyers escaped and the reinforcement mission succeeded, the loss of Jintsu marked a serious blow to Japan's night fighting strength in the Central Solomons. For the United States Navy, the Battle of Kolombangara offered no easy narrative. 1 Japanese cruiser had been sunk, but 3 Allied cruisers had taken torpedo hits, and a destroyer was gone. Nearly 90 men had been killed. Radar had again proven its worth, but it could not stop torpedoes that ran silent and fast beneath the waves. The limitations of surface combat doctrine, still adapting to the realities of the Solomons, had been laid bare. For the Imperial Japanese Navy, the loss of Jintsu and Rear Admiral Izaki was more than a tactical setback. It marked the end of a certain confidence in the effectiveness of traditional night engagements. The Tokyo Express had delivered some of its cargo, but at a cost that could not be sustained. Both sides withdrew, wounded. But the battle was not over in any strategic sense. Reinforcements had landed. Munda still held. The slot remained a contested artery of war. Another convoy was already being assembled. Thank you for watching this video. Please leave a like. It really helps out the channel. If there is a topic, battle, or person you would like to know more about, let me know your thoughts in a comment. I would also like to thank all my patrons and channel members for their generous support. If you enjoy House of History and you want to support my work, consider joining me on Patreon. For just $1 per month, you will gain early access to all my videos without any in-video advertisements. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.